So in addition, obviously, to some of the comments we just played you about Ukraine and Russia, in the summit yesterday, Trump also made some pretty interesting comments about our own elections, including announcing that he wants to get rid of mail-in ballots altogether. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want change are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else.
He is wrong. There are dozens of countries that use mail-in ballots around the world. But this dovetails with a Truth Social post he also put up. This is the first element in this block, guys. We can throw this up on the screen. He says, I'm going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots and also, while we're at it, highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines, which cost 10 times more than accurate and sophisticated watermark paper, which is faster, leaves no doubt at the end of the evening as to who won and who lost the election. We are now the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. Again, not true. All others gave it up because the massive voter fraud encountered. We will begin this effort, which will be strongly opposed by the Democrats because they cheat at levels never seen before by signing an executive order to help bring honesty to the 2026 midterm elections. So TLDR here, he's saying he's going to sign an executive order that will get rid of mail-in ballots. He targets this directly at the midterm elections and says effectively the only reason that Democrats win is because they cheat. This comes on the heels of some comments he made after his meeting with Putin, where he claims Putin told him, you got to get rid of these mail-in ballots. This is absolutely preposterous. This is B3, guys. Let's go ahead.
This is what he said Putin said.
This is what exactly, which is what he claimed that Putin said, which maybe he did. I mean, it would be the sort of thing that Putin could say to sort of play to his ego, et cetera. Anyway, let's go ahead and play B3.
Vladimir Putin said something, one of the most interesting things. He said, your election was rigged because you have mail-in voting. He said mail-in voting, every election. He said no country has mail-in voting. It's impossible to have mail-in voting and have honest elections. And he said that to me. It was very interesting because we talked about 2020. He said, you won that election by so much. And that's how he got it. He said, and if you would have won, we wouldn't have had a war. You'd have all these millions of people alive now instead of dead. And he said, and you lost it because of mail-in voting. It was a rigged election. But mail-in voting, Sean.
So there you go. Again, insisting that we're the only country that does it. That's just simply not true. But in any case, Saagar, what did you make of these comments?
Actually, apparently in Russia, you know what's really crazy? You can actually vote online in some places.
Wow.
Which sounds even, frankly, like much
more
less
insecure. Yeah.
I mean, does your vote count for anything? I'm not so sure.
A bunch of people showed images. Trump himself has voted mail-in, by the way.
Man, we got to get with the Russian playbook. People who cannot come to a polling station who are elderly or disabled can request that election officials bring a portable ballot box to their home. Not the same as the mail-in system.
Wow.
It's much more courteous. Remote mail-in voting or remote online voting in certain regions, not in Moscow. Opposition groups have raised concerns about. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be saying this because it's not exactly like Russian elections are like the greatest,
free and fair,
most free and fair in the whole world. This has always been my biggest beef with the GOP, and it's one of those which really annoys me because two of the states. Because Marshall is from Oregon, and I think I was there in Oregon visiting them when they were voting, and I saw them fill out their ballots, and I was like, wait, so you guys don't vote in person at all. Their voter participation is actually very high.
Yeah.
And it's super convenient. Like, they get it at home, everybody goes through and, like, fills out their ballot, and you can go and drop it off at a number of locations. There is identity verification, like, in terms of sending it in, but their voter participation is actually quite high. I mean, that's all what I really care about. I think high voter participation is good. One of the things which is also annoying, this is very outdated, is that in the old days, the Republicans would win the low turnout elections and the Democrats would win the high turnout election. Republicans now have switched it and are much better off with low turnout voters, as we saw in the 2024 election. So you actually want more people to vote in your election.
Especially in the midterms,
Listen, I mean, the people who dominate low turnout elections, like suburban white ladies and activists and all these other people, you don't want those people to be the only people who can vote, because they'll drag their ass across town to go stand in line for 2 or 3 hours a day. It's the, workman or electrician or something like that who is much less likely to come out and vote unless they feel very strongly to actually do so. So just purely from like a tactical point of view, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. But that's just, look, I mean, in terms of his ability to do it, as I understand it, they can try to use the DHS to set standards, but in part of the reason why we are where we are with the most inaccurate voting system in terms of compiling votes in the over a short period of time is because we have completely unfederalized elections, which is a lot of pluses and minuses. Pluses now, when Trump is president, he can't just come in and decree how Oregon or whatever is going to count votes. But the minus is, what is it? New York takes 3 or 4 weeks to count votes. It's ridiculous.
And New York both take a really
California
long time,
and New York, it's out. And that is the one thing I just wish Dems would acknowledge. It's guys, you can't do it this way. It undermines trust in the system, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, the most developed countries in the world can count votes in 24 hours, and even lesser developed countries like India, Brazil has results in 24 hours. And I think in the UK, Australia, all of them. Every time I've covered their elections, we know the exact winner, the night of. Even in fractional ones, like in France, where they have to tally up various different parties and look at the percentage base. So that's the one thing where, for the Democratic states, they have to stop pretending their voting system isn't just weird to the naked eye. And that's what provides a lot of the stuff for the conspiracy theorists. I'm not saying they're correct. I'm just, I'm pointing out, the inefficiency is a huge problem.
Yeah. Fair. In fairness, though, it's not California or New York's results that have been disputed by Trump.
No,
it's
I'm not.
Because they're not swing states.
I am not saying that whatsoever.
I'm just saying that the conspiracy theorists would find a reason to be unhappy with the results that don't go their way no matter what.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I think one aspect of this is, you're right. Tactically, this is absolutely idiotic. We have brains and memories longer than a goldfish, and can remember back to 2020 when arguably Trump lost the election because of the way that he derided mail-in balloting. And it's very possible that made up the margin in some key states.
It definitely did,
so
especially in Georgia.
In 2024, they learned the lesson. They had very aggressive, quote unquote, ballot harvesting processes, especially in state like Pennsylvania. They really encouraged mail-in voting, and lo and behold, Trump wins. Not to say that was the only factor, but it certainly didn't hurt that they were actually, availing themselves of all of the methods with which they could gather votes and get their voters to the polls. And now he seemingly has forgotten that lesson. On the other hand, because this executive order is not going to be able to, get rid of mail-in balloting across the country, because it states quite plainly in the Constitution that the states are responsible for setting the time and manner and place of the voting. What this is really, in my opinion, all designed to do is to cast doubt on the electoral results. So if things go very poorly for him in the midterms, which they are pretty likely to do, just historically, and judging by where his approval rating is and how people feel about the Republican Party having complete control of DC right now, so that he can then say, this was all rigged, this was all fake, and really cast doubt in the same way that he did in 2020 with regards to the presidential election, cast doubt on those results as well. And then you're off to the races with challenging, as members of Congress come to be sworn in and to be seated, then you're challenging individual members, this was rigged, this wasn't fair, et cetera, and creating a giant chaotic mess that he can try to use to his advantage. I think that's more what this is about. And remember, this isn't the first thing that he's done or said with regard to voting in elections. He also had a big executive order earlier. He's been trying to get some of the election rolls and voting apparatus from different states sent to DC for analysis. So this is an ongoing project, and this is the latest iteration of this. He also said something that was quite striking about the as Professor Sachs was just reminding and informing all of us, Ukraine right now is not a democracy. Zelensky rules by military fiat, effectively. And Trump seemed very interested in learning about this when he was sitting there with Zelensky. This is before, guys. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, No more elections. Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake.
You like this idea?
Yeah, it's really funny.
Hilarious.
Well, it's very hilarious too for Zelensky, in fighting the thing on democracy to joke about canceling elections. It's super hilarious.
Yeah.
This is part of the hypocrisy, on the entire thing. Krystal, I wish I could say that it was a conspiracy theory, everything you just laid out, but considering what happened in 2020, can't really say that.
No, that's it.
Yeah, it's like, well,
you're like, well, he's joking, but is he?
Yeah.
And we can.
Well, not about the war thing, but about what you were saying about contesting potential
Results,
races.
yeah.
It's like, well, you already did it, and Congress is full of a lot of other people. Would they really willingly want to turn over power, especially if the Democrats take it? They could set up a huge fight with Mike Johnson, with more like establishment Republicans and you can imagine like the MTGs or whatever of the world, contest, or at least turning it into a show. I mean, who the hell knows, right? In terms of accepting members, because the body has to accept to swear them in. I mean, I guess it could be uncharted territory.
Yeah. And here's the other thing with regard to, those specific comments about, oh, hey, maybe if you have a war, you don't have to have an election, is we have seen the playbook that he has used in this administration where what does he do? He uses the pretext of a supposed emergency in order to claim more extraordinary powers. I mean, big balls being, beaten up in D.C. And now we've got National Guard coming in from all over the country for this, to stand around in Georgetown or on the National Mall or at Union Station or whatever. You have the tariffs are justified based on a quote unquote emergency. This is the playbook that he has used time and again throughout this administration. So is it really so crazy to think that this guy, who has never showed any indication that he ever wants to give up power in any circumstance, and who could face, again, potential legal ramifications if he is no longer president of the United States, certainly a possibility that continues to be on the table, do we really think that it's crazy to imagine he's considering the potential mechanisms to claim, to continue to stay in power past when he, is democratically elected? I don't think it's that crazy to consider, especially when we can show this. We can play this next one. He has a place in the White House where he's got campaign merch. Which, first of all, again, any other president, you would be like, this is a scandal, right? With him, it's just like people don't even notice. But not only does he have campaign merch, he's got Trump 2028. Campaign merch sort of like hidden away that he was showing off to the head of Azerbaijan recently in the White House. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
You're not allowed to run a bid. So, because I'm 28 points higher than anyone. Yeah. Everybody wants me to run, but
including us.
It's funny. So this drives me crazy. Look, 4 more years. They go 4 more years. So it's sort of cool.
Bannon also says he's going to, they're going to figure out Trump 2028. Trump says different things about this at different times, but again,
he recently said he wouldn't run. So,
you just can't put anything past him. And whether he actually runs again or whether he comes up with some pretext of emergency, says we're not having the elections, whether he has some sort of a puppet who he feels like he can control and has to come and pay homage to him. Personally, I don't see any indication that until he is done with this world, that he is going to just willingly hand off power.
I think he won't run again, but he'll do what I predicted, which is be the king in waiting down in Mar-a-Lago, who can constantly derail things, with a Truth Social post or any of that. He can be the anointer of the Republican Party. I've used the analogy to Ronald Reagan. And I think, I've also just wondered, watching Trump now, I genuinely think he might be bored of actually being president. I remember noticing that whenever I would interview him. It's like, he's almost childlike, gets distracted by things that are literally on his desk. And that's why he's been doing all of these great renovation projects in the, like the ball.
You love them. Yeah.
The Rose Garden or the Gilded Office or the ballroom or the flagpole. He spends a lot of time, looking at these things. I'm not making this. Remember, he went on the rooftop, right? That seems to be what a decent amount of his attention is actually captured on, is leaving his own imprint on the White House. Probably the most transformative the physical real estate of the White House since Harry Truman, who oversaw a total renovation of the building. But
also definitely the most like queer-coded president with like
really?
his love of Broadway musicals and interior design.
I wouldn't go that far because there's nothing.
And makeup and hair and makeup.
There's nothing tasteful about. Maybe this is stereotypical, but there's nothing tasteful about the gilded
Quite
decoration.
the opposite. Quite the opposite.
That's what I mean. So it's actually very masculine coded, if you ask me. It's like it's what somebody would think is a good idea of decoration. If anybody's been watching HBO's The Gilded Age, it reminds me a lot of how that stuff looks. Or if you've ever spent any time in the Middle East, that's basically what the Saudis, the Qataris, and all this stuff think is tasteful in terms of their decoration. Just my own personal bias, just saying, not exactly the way I would do it. But yeah, generally here with Trump, the most likely, look, the mail-in ballot thing is probably DOA in terms of the way that they actually want to do it. Sowing or questioning election results, nobody's going to question that. That's definitely going to happen.
That's their
if they
playbook,
lose.
yeah.
There's just no question, right? In terms of how it operationalizes and all of that, I tend to think it'll probably won't go anywhere, but I could be wrong. He is the president, and he can actually do a lot of whatever he wants. And this time around, you've got Pam Bondi and these other morons who work for him. So who knows, right? It's actually, there's a lot more up in the air. Where, MAGA and other people rightfully in the past would have been like, oh, that's not going to happen. But now it's like, well, I don't know. I personally don't know.
Did you see they brought in some other guy to be co-FBI deputy alongside Dan Bongino? It's definitely like a demotion for Dan Bongino. I think it was like the Missouri AG or something like that.
Missouri AG promoted him to the deputy. I think Bongino's being punished for speaking out.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Because remember he had that whole sort of like mental breakdown, and then there were the rumors that he was going to resign, and then he came back and whatever.
Okay, there were no rumors. It was him on the phone. I can exclusively report.
Okay,
it's not a rumor. All right, whenever he calls people and says, "Hey, I'm thinking of resigning,"
Just
so you all know.
Apparently, that's going on. But let's put B6 up on the screen. This is kind of the last piece to put this. The pieces all in place. This was from a little while ago, but Trump is demanding a new census to exclude undocumented immigrants and redraw all the lines. Now, do I think they're going to be able to pull this off before the midterm elections? Census collection, it takes them years. They're already preparing.
It's a 10-year purpose.
They're already preparing for the 2030 census now. So, the idea that they'd be able to pull this off in time without court challenges and get all the maps redrawn, I don't think that's going to happen. But you do have, the state of Texas is redrawing their maps. California, this will transition us into Gavin and what's going on there. California is likely to retaliate and redraw their maps as well. There are some other red states. There are more red states that could redraw maps that, have full Republican control than there are Democratic states. But all of this is a long way of saying, I think the playbook is, number one, they're going to try to tilt the playing field as much as they can to mitigate the potential midterm losses. So that's number one. Then, and number two, as part of that, there's going to be more of this casting down on mail-in ballots and casting down on the process and creating the pretext and the narrative so that if and when they do perform poorly in the midterms, that he can continue to sow doubt on various electoral results. And, I guess the question is whether or not it's going to be, quote unquote, too big to rig. Because if you have Democrats, let's say, win the House, but it's by 2 seats, then you could see an all-out
court challenges,
an all-out narrative attack on those, whichever results were the closest in whichever states they have, the most ability to cast doubt on. If it's could be in California, and then the things you were saying about how long it takes to cast the ballots, that could come into play. You could see the way that this would all play out, because while it's not, it's not the end of the world for Trump if Democrats do win the House, it would mean that they have subpoena power and they could cause some trouble. He hasn't interested himself too much outside of the one big beautiful bill and actually passing legislation through the House and the Senate. He prefers to act through executive orders, so it's not like that aspect of his power would be curtailed. But yeah, if you got Democrats in there, doing subpoenas on the Epstein files, on all of the incredible corruption rife throughout this administration, it could be an issue for him. He could end up getting impeached yet again. That's certainly a possibility that's on the table. So it's not something that he is wanting to see unfold.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. I have no idea. Like you said, it could be several different scenarios. If you win 40 seats, then there's not, like 2 seats challenging or whatever is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or any of that. I will say on the census point, that is something I 100%. We've thought about this before, if you'll recall from the first Trump administration, about the idea that illegals should count in the U.S. Census as if they deserve representation when you're literally not here legally in the country. It is a major, actually, argument from the Commerce Clause, or the Commerce Department, which conducts the census. And if you'll recall, one of the first times that I truly realized how incompetent the Trump administration was is when they tried to do this in their first term, which again actually would have changed the 2020 census results, is whenever they implemented a rule, but the Supreme Court struck it down actually because they did not do the rule properly, misfiled the paperwork, and then Wilbur Ross lied about it actually at the time. But I know that there's all these legal fights about whether illegal should count or not. But I mean, it's, at a principle level, it's preposterous, the idea that if you're here illegally in the country.
Your beef is with the Constitution.
No, Krystal,
which says
listen,
specifically
I've heard this lib. I've heard
number of persons in each state.
Okay, so I've heard this lib nonsense now for a long time, but there's still a lot of questions about that persons and citizenship as to how it should be. It has not yet faced any scrutiny.
Number of
it has, as I'll repeat, has not faced representation or any scrutiny before the United States Supreme Court.
That may be true.
Who could envision 35 million people here living illegally, getting representation in the Congress?
All right, get the Constitution changed. But the Constitution
I have to change the Constitution?
Hold on, Saagar. The Constitution specifically refers in the places where, it's only for citizens, it specifically refers to citizens. Here it says the whole number of persons in each state. So you may not like it. You may not think that was what the founders intended, but that is what the Constitution says.
As I said, it has faced zero scrutiny before the U.S. Supreme Court. The only time that's ever gone down was whenever it was improperly implemented in 2018 because of Wilbur Ross. I would ask again for any person to think it is reasonable in any way that some 30. No, by the way, nobody even knows. That number is like probably a lower estimate. That who are living here illegally deserve representation in the U.S. Congress, which skews things. By the way, this is like the Republican fantasy dream, that people get imported into the country and then it increases their overall congressional representation in the United States. It's ridiculous. It's almost like quasi-citizenship, giving the ability for a number of electoral votes. If the illegals were all deported, who even knows the number of electoral votes for the way that our system would change? So, I mean, I think it's indefensible, the idea that people here are
I think the Electoral College is indefensible.
Oh, come on.
I think that the way the Senate is designed is indefensible.
Okay,
but I don't pretend like like it's set up any differently or like I have some court challenge I can do.
You really believe people here illegally should count to the United States?
Yes, I do.
For Electoral College?
I genuinely think
who
that
can
people
skew
who are
blue
here,
states?
First of all, I think that we should have a path to citizenship, so you have many fewer millions of people in the shadows who are undocumented.
Well, that's very
number
convenient,
one.
no?
But
for
number
the number,
two,
for legalizing these people, giving them political power.
There are all sorts of reasons why people who are here in this country, who are living and working and part of communities, deserve political representation. But putting my feelings aside about it, the Constitution is pretty clear about it.
As I have said, it's not clear. It's never faced scrutiny before the U.S. Supreme Court, and we will find out how it actually. Hopefully, we'll find out how it actually goes. I just think, look. Again, I ask any reasonable person.
Again, Texas would lose a lot of power.
Fine, I don't care. Go ahead. I don't give a shit.
So it's not even
this
like
isn't even a Republican thing.
This is all a lib plot. I mean, that's the way that it's frequently portrayed. This was some like lib plot to bolster their representation,
Wyoming,
but it's not even that. At this point.
Okay, no. First of all, California is nobody, again, even knows the population. It could be up to 10% of the population of California, maybe even more.
California and Texas are the two states that have the largest population of
they're also the number 2
undocumented immigrants.
Most populated states, so they would still have proportional number of representation.
Yeah, they would still have large representation.
But I'm saying, though, that California, the idea that their appropriation should be based on the population of illegals is crazy. I mean, and then again, I don't care whether it leads to more Republican or Democrats. This is purely a philosophical thing. It's ridiculous, this idea. New York, sorry, my earpiece is falling out, but New York, I'm trying to think of any of the other states that would be probably majorly impacted. I think Florida as well. But my point is on that one is it will all decrease in all of the populated states. 2 of the states that we just listed are red, 2 of the states are blue. So fine, I could care less how it actually works out like in the immediate term. I'm saying purely from this idea, and this has been a scandal, I think, from the very beginning of mass illegal immigration, that very few people ever actually want to acknowledge or or talk about. And pathway to citizenship, though, is basically rewarding people with political power for breaking the law. There's no other class of people that gets rewarded with political power, with representation in the Congress for breaking laws. Well, felons can't even vote in like half the states in the entire country, but illegals
which should also be changed.
Okay,
which
fine,
I also
but then,
wildly oppose. I think people who are in prison should be able to vote, but I know I'm out on a limb with that one.
That's actually crazy.
But in any case, I mean, let's not spiral into a whole immigration debate, but I think we can acknowledge the immigration system has been completely broken. I am of the view, you disagree, that immigrants are a benefit to the country, that it is good to have people wanting to come to this country, that they contribute to society, that they are an integral part of what makes America America. And so, to support pathway to citizenship, to grant those people status who have been here, have been working, who have been paying taxes, doing the right thing, I agree with that, and at this point,
I think that's a very rosy. First of all, that's not true. But second, no, it's
Look at the polling.
Okay, the polling on what? Because the way you just framed it is a nice little rosy little picture, right? So it's like, oh, the guy who came yesterday gets to also get a pathway to citizenship. What about the guy who came 40 years ago? That's why everybody groups all immigrants in the same group, and they don't divide anybody by education status, GDP, income, ability to contribute to the country, whether they're going to be on welfare. When you actually start to get down in the nitty gritty, it's like, do you think people are going to be on welfare for 50 years? Deserve citizenship? Absolutely not. Of course not. Most people would radically oppose that. So that's my point. It's just that broadly, the way that this is all being framed right now, and I get it, you'll get smoke from this from the liberals, but the point is that when you actually pose a lot of this to people, the details matter more than anything. So this whole pathway to citizenship question and political power, I think if more people knew that their electoral system was being rigged on behalf of a lot of illegals, they would be furious about it. Now, I'm not sitting here claiming the election is stolen. It's the way that it's always been, so be it. As I have always said, it should be changed, in my opinion, for the U.S. Supreme Court. But, I just think that this is a classic, in my opinion, democratic, over-reading of what people actually think about immigration. 64%
of registered voters favor giving most undocumented immigrants a pathway to legal status. 31% prefer deportation. Support is strong among Democrats, 89% independent, 71% Republicans are the only ones who net oppose it.
This is like saying that Medicare for all is popular whenever I'm like, well, okay, but then I'm like, okay, what about transgender surgeries? Is that going to be covered by taxpayer dollars? Absolutely not.
Medical care across the board.
See, this is what I mean about defining terms. And it's like, so welfare, transgender care, a vaccine, you're going to mandate all vaccines for all the time?
How does that relate to Medicare for all?
Because if it's a one-payer system, then they could deny you coverage and you can seek no actual individual ability to go and pick whatever type of doctor. That's what a government-run system would look like. For coverage, then they can
That's not the way Medicare works, Saagar.
No, but it is, because if they're refusing to cover things or you can get denied coverage, this is a classic example of all socialized medicine systems. It's one of control.
No, that's not true.
No, but it is.
There are many ways you can do this. Medicare, people are happy with Medicare. It costs less than the private health insurance system. And yes, Medicare for all is very popular.
Yes.
The reason it doesn't exist is because of a political class that is opposed to it. With regard to immigration, we have seen, and I think you would agree with this, a huge backlash to Trump-era policies.
Yes, I agree.
That have led people to be quite supportive, actually, of immigrants, seeing them as a net benefit to society just in general, which actually majority has always felt that way, and supporting specific policy proposals such as a path to citizenship for most undocumented immigrants. On the specific question of how people feel about the census, I don't know. I don't think they know, right? I don't think they probably thought. I have no idea. But just to bring it all back before we go any further afield, so we can talk about Gavin Newsom and his freaking memes, I will just say, we'll see what happens at the Supreme Court with the census, if they're even competent enough to get it to that point, because the plain-faced reading of the Constitution says all persons. It does not specify citizen, non-citizen, the way that you want it to. And so we'll see. Then again, listen, this court is very political. So they may find some convoluted way to interpret it that way. But certainly the plain-faced reading of the Constitution says all whole persons, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, look, we'll see with that. I agree. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.